your work reflects a lot of who you are. Like that's a message that's really sent out there. And while that can be positive because you want to really produce good work, it can be very toxic of you're only seen for what you produce and you're not seen for who you really are. Um, so there's that like weird balance of that. And like you talking about CVs and also acknowledging the shadow CV, like we put out these, like people see us based on these things that we do and these accomplishments. And I don't know, maybe like just really utilizing like referral sources and recommendations and talking to people to find out more about who this person is useful. But yeah, that in just so many ways, I think especially right now with everything being online, like if you're finding a new job, you're solely judging a person based on like what they put down, right? And it's so hard to connect on that personal level now. But yeah, it's such an important piece because I feel like in order for my own self-worth to feel validated, I need not just my work to be validated, right? Like I need myself, like who I am. And that's so challenging.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Um,
I was just gonna say, I think that something that a lot of people probably neglect doing is taking the time to identify who they actually are aside from their work, right? Like if you can define that for yourself as like, I am X, Y, and Z person and make a nice list for yourself. So if anything at work goes wrong, you have this nice positive list of things that you can define yourself by that have nothing to do with the rejection that you just faced. I feel like that's something that a lot of people just don't even think about doing.
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, it's a starting point for a lot of people to, start having, because like you were saying, a lot of people get so tied up in what they're doing that they just like, they don't even know who they are without the things that they're doing in their work. And if you haven't even had that conversation with yourself yet, it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to get lost in your work, especially in kind of an academic type of discipline, because if you are at a kind of a job where there's no off switch necessarily, you're the one dictating that, then you can really just get immersed to a extreme degree. It's not like you shut off after a certain hour or something like that, unless you're really managing your own schedule in a way that I think most people don't do. So I think it's very easy for people to do that. It can really help, I think, to also have a social support network that is. I mean, there's different ways of doing this. So you could think about like other people that you talk to about like not just the successes but also the failures. So it's normalized, and you can vent to people, or you can get support when something does go wrong from those other people. Or even if it's people that are not actually in the same, not in academia at all, right? So people that do are able to shut off after 5 or 6 o'clock, and who don't necessarily have that same sense of inherently meshed identity with their work. Talking to those people, I think, gives you some perspective on what things could be like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you look at this from like maybe an evolutionary standpoint, and you're talking about like support networks and systems, and going back to, like you said, like 3.5 million years ago, we were in tribes and all. Can we like take anything from there when we look at evolutionary psychology as far as like what humans probably like were developed to need when it comes to facing rejection or these like moments of negativity and anxiety? Is there anything like, what kind of stuff do you think of when I say that?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. So I don't know if something like imposter syndrome is something that's existed for our species, entire history, but rejection has, and it's typically been social rejection. And so I think it's very easy to interpret, like for instance, workplace or academic rejection as social rejection. And we know from a lot of research that social rejection is one of the most damaging experiences that people can have for their mental health. And does have an evolutionary basis. I mean, so people who were frequently experiencing social rejection in small groups, when we were living in somewhat smaller groups, that would have been a really sort of dangerous line to walk with respect to are you going to be able to survive into the future? Because if people are rejecting you, you might not be getting that support that you need in order to weather downturns in finding food or economic resources of various sorts, or you might get excluded from the group entirely, which is basically a death sentence in many places. The other big piece of this is that social rejection is linked a lot to status, and so it's not just the being a member of the group. It's also like how you see your position in it. Are you somebody who is getting the benefits, I guess, of feeling like you're more powerful in a group, or that you have some control over your own destiny, and you can get the other additional potential gains that come from higher status. So experiencing these kinds of events in a very almost artificial setting that we have in kind of the workplace I think can be really easily interpreted through a different lens, and that is through the lens not necessarily just of the workplace, but also this idea of if my paper's rejected, that suddenly that's hurting my inherent sense of status. It's hurting my sense of like, are people going to want to collaborate with me? Am I worth talking to? All these kinds of things. And so having an additional social support network where you can turn to can help, I think, to reestablish that sense of inclusion, or having that you're not at the bottom of the hierarchy necessarily, that you have these people that are there even if you do get rejected in these other domains. So I think there is, as you're saying, some important connections to aspects of our evolutionary past that play out in terms of these academic experiences.
Yeah, I'm even thinking in terms of what some sources of social rejection could have been, way back in like the hunter-gatherer tribal days. And I'm thinking that a lot of the circumstances that would have been around daily life for somebody in those times would have been very much group oriented. I wonder if there's anything to the idea of like changing the perception of your, maybe it's research in the case that we're talking about with getting something published, where thinking of the work that you're doing as a greater contribution to a group of people rather than something that specifically defines yourself. Because I just think that when you tie up, like we were talking about before, your personal individual identity in your research, as opposed to I'm doing this research to further the discussion and the discovery around this topic, I feel like you can be like, okay, it got rejected. It wasn't providing enough value to the group of people. I need to go forward and do more research to provide more value to my group, to my tribe, to the world of psychology, whatever that may be. I wonder if just framing that in a slightly different way could be a way of helping people in the process of like making sure that people are thinking of it in that context as they're going through their work, to maybe remove the identity piece from the work that they're doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that one of the things you said in there was this idea of framing these experiences as almost part of a discussion. And I think that is actually important, not just in the context of these experiences we're talking about now, but in the context of understanding the whole scientific process more generally. And I think would be a worthy kind of sea change in terms of the how we frame, whether it's in terms of like training students or just thinking about people's views on science as a whole, framing them as part of a conversation or part of a discussion. So if you experience rejection, it's basically like somebody just disagreeing with you. Well, now it's still part of it, and you're still having an ongoing conversation with them, and you can continue that conversation. It doesn't like somebody says no, you don't just walk away.
Yeah, the conversation's not over.
Yeah, right. And same thing with yes, right? I mean, I think that's equally important, right? So if you get something accepted, it's not the end. And I think that part of it is the framing that we have in our heads, but I think that comes from somewhere. And it comes from the incentive structure that we have set up for a lot of academic jobs, which is like you get the publication and it gives you this value for your career. And you have to, I mean, there's got to be some type of incentive structure for jobs. But by doing that, I think we, in some sense, implicitly maybe highlight the idea that when you've got that thing you can add to your CV now, that hit, that's the end. That somehow you've like crossed the threshold and that's it.
Made it.
Yeah, but that's just not how it works, right? This is like papers. People publish lots of papers on the same topic. Why do they do that? It's because it's not any one paper is not the endpoint, and we should think about it as this like broader conversation. And I think if we had a way of doing that more broadly, then I think it would also help with these issues that we've been discussing.